Hey friends, let's celebrate Inktober with this 5-minute flower project. I'm using Liquitex acrylic ink in carbon black, and this is an eyedropper ink, so I'm just going to put some into my ceramic palette. You could use a plate if you don't have a palette. Just make sure you clean it up right away afterwards so the acrylic ink doesn't dry into your watercolor palette. I collected some flowers on the walk home from school, and I'm going to use them to just press these really simple, sweet designs onto my watercolor paper. So I'm pressing the flower into the ink first, and then I'm printing it. And I just press firmly and give it a little bit of a jiggle to get the ink onto the page. And then when I come to do the next one, I'm using the side of the flower instead. And on the third one, I'm going to press it down and give it a bit of a twirl, almost smudging the ink. I want that bottom flower to have a bit more weight to it. Now I'm coming in with what's called a rigger brush. It's a watercolor brush, so I'm going to use it but then wash it right away afterwards so I don't wreck it, because acrylic paint will dry and not wash off once it's dry. And I'm using the original flower here for some more inspiration. I'm using these little marks to add some details, to add in the stems, add in these tiny leaves that are below the flower. I'm not trying to get a complete representation of the flower here though. I'm just working with the shapes and the marks that interest me, and then I kind of start to freestyle it, just adding in extra marks. I like the rigger brush because it has these long bristles to it, and it creates really lovely tiny lines. So keep a light touch here. Be careful not to drag your hand through the ink until it'll take a few minutes to dry. And I'm also adding a few extra lines coming out from the flower just to add a little bit of movement to the piece. So I've done this on a piece of watercolor paper so that it could be like a little postcard or a note for somebody. You could also use these designs for a background on an art journaling page. They look really cool on a book if you have an old book page to use, or you could cut them out and use them as collage elements. So just dashing in some light movement marks to capture some flow of the flowers. Next up, I'm using some Dreamer's Gold by Beam Paints, which is a Canadian company. So this is a watercolor paint, and I'm lathering it up so that I can add a little bit of splatter to my page. If you don't have iridescent watercolor, you could use an iridescent acrylic paint by thinning it down with some water, or you might have an iridescent liquid acrylic, an ink to use. So you'll notice that first I shook the brush with water to get the bigger drops, and now I'm using my finger to do a finer splatter. And I like to turn my piece of paper as I go just to make sure that the splatter looks kind of irregular and I don't get the marks all going the same direction. If any of your splatters are a little too strong, you can use your brush just to drink up some of the extra ink. Have fun playing with this technique and tag me on Instagram @CoastalNicole to share your work.